Ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. And today we're going to have a guest that you may recognize. That's right, it's our vintage correspondent, John Morton, who of course is a pre-war golf card enthusiast and a history buff to boot. We cover what it's like to be married to a very talented golfer. We cover John's latest travels and how he always manages to integrate golf trading cards and historical artifacts into his travel plans. And finally, John opens my eyes once again to different ways of participating in the hobby as we discuss and compare preserving history versus personal nostalgia when it comes to collecting. Without further ado, here's the conversation. What's up, John? How are you doing?
I am wonderful, Mike. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I am living vicariously whenever I watch friends and family out golfing, with two young kids. I'm spending a lot of time at home, fondling my cards, late at night once everybody's gone to bed. Um, I saw your wife had an incredible accomplishment. She came tied 17th against a field of professional golfers at the Tennessee State Women's Open. Like, congratulations to her.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, she played professionally a little over 10 years ago for a few years, had LPGA status for a couple of years as well, and um, turned to a different career path for the last 11, 12 years. But she's gotten the golf bug back recently in the last year or two, and she wants to get back into tournament play. So she's starting to look at, maybe trying to do a Monday qualifier here or there, but also looking at state opens that she can get into, easily. And the Tennessee State Women's Open was an easy one for us to get up to. We live in Birmingham, Alabama. Tennessee State Women's Open is only about 3 hours from where we live. So yeah, went up there a couple weeks back and she played really, really well. I was really proud of her.
Well, again, congratulations. That blows my mind. I'm sure that your ego doesn't get in the way, that your wife can beat you at golf. I know you're an incredible golfer yourself, but I saw you post some things that she was beating you on your trip in Scotland.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She beats me pretty handily and usually from the same set of tees. But my biggest accomplishment was not getting fired as her caddy during the Women's Open. So I was really thankful for that.
There you go. If your marriage can last the caddy player relationship, then you've got a strong bond. Speaking
There
of
you go.
speaking of trips, I mentioned Scotland. So,
Mhm.
how was your trip? I know St. Andrews was involved. How did things go?
Yeah, it was a once in a lifetime kind of bucket list trip. We've been to Scotland before, so not once in a lifetime to go to Scotland per se, but we played 10 rounds of golf in 12 days. Just the two of us. We didn't go with any other friends or anybody else. But 10 rounds in 12 days, all over Scotland. So we started on the
Wow.
West Coast with Royal Troon, which is we played just a few weeks before the Open Championship was there. So all the grandstands were up. It was a really unique experience to Prestwick the following day, which is where the first Open Championship was held back in 1860. Went off the west coast of Scotland for a few days, then came back and eventually spent 6 days in St. Andrews, culminating in our final round of the trip being on the old course. So it was a really, really special trip. Got to see some friends while I was over there, and both friends in golf, but also in the collecting hobby. So that was a lot of fun, and obviously getting to finish there in St. Andrews was quite the experience.
Wow, that's incredible. And I mean that you're living the dream like that I would have, and that's a kind of been a theme in these last few episodes. Is I'm getting to talk to people who are doing incredible things. I get to live vicariously. So pardon me if we don't get to cards right away, but for you as a history buff, I know last time we talked, you talked about bringing some very iconic golf cards along with you on your trip, and you brought them back to the old stomping grounds of old Tom Morris and got some memories of sharing your cards with the history of the cards and the artwork in the location
Yep.
of where it was painted or photographed or whatever it was. I don't think they had cameras in the late 1800s, but there you go. Um, so, this is kind of a weird question, I guess, but let's get to cards. Like, did golf trading cards or the hobby fund your trip in any way, or were cards involved at all?
To some extent, yeah. It didn't fund the whole thing. Again, it was very much a bucket list trip, so we didn't hold back on a lot of the aspects of the trip. It was mostly the high end courses that we played to really get that full golf, Scotland experience. However, a good portion of it, I would say, was funded through my collecting hobby, both cards and other golf memorabilia, as people can see on camera, with the other memorabilia behind me.
Yeah, I'm not sure when or if I'll ever release the video for this, but for those who are just listening, John really should host a golf card podcast, and I should be the guest because behind me is, some silly personal stuff, and behind John is a beautiful setup of some hickory golf clubs and artifacts and photographs of himself at St. Andrews on the bridge, and a beautiful, I think I don't know what, 20-inch by 30-inch painting of that on the greens. Was that the big playoff in the early 1900s between Harry Vardon?
No, so I know what you're talking about. This is something different, but similar type visual there. This is an engraving from 1850, a hand-colored engraving of the artwork called the Golfers. It's one of the most famous golf artworks in existence, and I kind of like to think of it as the Mona Lisa of golf, from an artwork standpoint. But this is one of the original engravings from 1850 that was done from the actual painting that was painted just a few years prior. So
Wow.
yeah, unique piece of golf history there that I've got hanging over my desk.
One day I'd love to just pop over to your house and get a tour. It'd be like a museum of golf cards and golf artifacts. Your collection's
Come,
incredible.
come
Now,
on down, but bring your clubs. We'll tee it up.
amazing. I can't hit a hickory, so I'll have some game improvements from the 21st century. So, hey, just to wrap up the, chat about St. Andrews and Scotland, because
Mhm.
I do want to get to your 1900 Cope set. I'm sure there's a nice story to go there, but how did golf cards influence your trip to Scotland? Did you bring any cards with you? Is there any, did you bring anything historically significant like you did the first time?
hmm Yeah, that's a great question. And it definitely, cards and golf history played a major role in the layout of our trip and the itinerary that I planned, because I planned everything for the trip myself. I didn't go through a third party company. I'm very much an organizational type person when it comes to planning vacations. So I thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it. So the golf history aspect was really important for me to make sure that we were tying in certain individuals, certain events, certain iconic moments in the history of the game, with some of the rounds we were playing and some of the places we were visiting. To the trip itself, I did bring a couple items with me. Uh, a couple because I knew I was going to be meeting with a friend in the hobby, who's a big collector that lives in St. Andrews, and I wanted to be able to gift him a couple things. Actually, two different friends that I brought a few things for, just a few small cards that I wanted to gift to them. And then I did also bring one historically significant piece with me from my collection. In St. Andrews, the short version of this story, in St. Andrews, adjacent to the 18th fairway, is a famous hotel that's very well known in the game of golf called the Rusacks Hotel. Overlooks the 18th hole and kind of that iconic view of the old course at St. Andrews. And that hotel has been around for 120, 130 years. I believe it was around the turn of the century it was built. But that hotel played host to most all famous golfers in the early 1900s when they would go to visit the town of St. Andrews to play in tournaments and play golf there. And in particular, in the 1930s, there were several different major historical events that took place in the town of St. Andrews. Obviously, starting in 1930 with Bobby Jones completing his Grand Slam, his famous and the only Grand Slam in the history of the game. But later in the decade, he revisited St. Andrews in 1936. It was the first time he had been back since 1930. And he visited on his way out to Germany. He was going to travel out to the Summer Olympics that were going to be conducted in Berlin that summer. But he stopped in St. Andrews to be able to play around a golf and visit the town for the first time since winning his Grand Slam. And I happened to acquire a couple of years ago now the visitor's guest log from the Russex Hotel from the 1930s. It technically spans from 1935 through 1939, but it contains the names and sign-in dates and travel information for almost every foreign visitor that stayed at the Russex Hotel, including Bobby Jones and his wife, Robert Woodruff, who was the president of Coca-Cola for 60 plus years and a good friend of Bobby Jones, Grantland Rice, who was also traveling with Bobby Jones at the time, over to the winter or to the Summer Olympics, and all of the dates of their stay there in St. Andrews. It wasn't written in Bobby Jones's hand, but it's a very famous trip that Bobby Jones took back to St. Andrews from a historical standpoint, because it was also, like I said, it was the first time he had returned. So the town really kind of blew up and got overly excited when they found out that he had made this unannounced trip. So I have the visitor's log from the Russex Hotel from that time frame. That log also includes the check-in names for the entire 1938 Walker Cup team, in the actual handwriting and signatures of every player from the U.S. team, including Francis Ouimet, who famously won the U.S. Open in 1913 as an amateur. It also includes other names that are important in the game of golf and the history of the game, such as Bob Hope in particular. And then lastly, in that book is the signature of the Prince of England at that time, who went on to become the King of England, King George, in 1936. So very, very famous book, very historical book from a very, very notable book from a historical standpoint. But I brought that with me to be able to show to my friends that live in St. Andrews, just so they could soak in that history, but also to be able to walk through the halls of the Russex Hotel with that book was a very, very humbling moment and very very personal moment for me, because my wife and I stayed at the Russex Hotel that week.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. Did you show the book to anybody working there or the manager at the hotel? Like did anybody fan over it?
So the friends that I have that live in St. Andrews, friends in the game that live in St. Andrews, they know some folks at the Russex Hotel. The schedule that my wife and I had those few days that we were in town, I wasn't able to coordinate for me to sit down with the ownership or the management, but between you and me and all of your listeners, my wife and I are already planning another trip back to Scotland next year. So I'm probably going to bring it back with me so that I can do exactly that next year.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Good luck in meeting with the owners or the managers or whoever it is. I think that will be a great experience. Make sure you take lots of photos. That's interesting because you know what? If I were to travel, I would feel nervous bringing along such an important artifact. Even bringing like a single card in a magnetic one touch or top loader or a graded PSA slab or whatever, I'd feel nervous of losing it or getting it stolen or whatever. And as
Yeah.
as I've talked to a couple of guys in the last few episodes about, starting golf cart shops in unconventional places, security is always something that pops into the conversation at some point. Like, were you worried about having that thing lost or stolen?
Um, I wasn't honestly, because I kept it in my backpack that I kept, my work laptop and some other personal things in. But when we were also staying in pretty reputable hotels, so I wasn't worried from a safety standpoint as long as it was in the room. But I also didn't necessarily having it laid, I didn't have it laid out, on the bed when we weren't there. So I felt perfectly safe with it with me. Plus, with it being a book, it held flat within my backpack while we were traveling. So I didn't have it in checked baggage or anything like that. I always had it on my person.
Wow. 100 years from now, when neither of us are around anymore, it'll be just cool that, someone like yourself, a passionate, enthusiastic collector, lugged around that historical artifact. That book is living a life. So that's pretty incredible instead of just sitting behind some museum glass. Um,
Yeah, I will say to that point, that's one thing that I take a great amount of pride in for myself is that as a collector, I don't view my collection from a hoarding perspective. I like to think of myself as just the current conservator of that item until its next stop in its life. So as long as I'm preserving those items, as long as I'm preserving this history, that's what matters most to me. I don't very few things I have real true sentimental feeling towards. So I don't I don't feel like anything isn't going to have another home at some point.
it's interesting how the hobby and card collecting and historical artifact collecting can have different motivations. A lot of people, myself included, have big parts of their collection that relate to our personal nostalgia, our histories. And you can kind of think of it as like curating that history of your life or curating a theme of whatever fandom you have. But that curation is often really just securing it in behind closed doors and locked cabinets in the dark. And
Mhm.
and I like how you take a step past that, and I forget the word you used, but just bringing life into the artifacts, history, so that when it passes on, that artifact's seen the world, and perhaps it could be a bit more weathered, but that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It shares and spreads the history of the item, but yeah, curation is a good way to think about it. It's definitely my for my collection as a whole. This is not a permanent stop. It's just a stop in the life of that item. So if I enjoy it for a certain period of time and I feel like it's ready for a new home, I'm not hesitant to do that.
In our hobby, there's a lot of older people, typically older gentlemen, who especially when it comes to vintage cards and pre-war cards, tends to collect, hoard, and it makes me wonder how many people actually have some kind of succession plan for the artifact. Do people unload their collections as they get elderly, so that those artifacts are preserved, not lost, not thrown into an estate sale, or the very least writing in their will if they want to hold on to that object until they pass, where it goes or who the family should contact to ensure that artifact is preserved.
Yeah, that's a really important thing that I think our generation and when I say our generation, I think of anybody under the age of 50, really, whether you're 25 or 49, anybody under 50, we may not really be thinking about that. The preservation or what is to be done with our collection if we suddenly were no longer here. Um, and that's something, I have a separate insurance policy for my whole collection, that's separate from my homeowner's insurance. But beyond that, I do have an ongoing inventory list of my collection, and my wife knows where to find that, and she knows who to contact if something were to happen, so that it can be handled with the appropriate care, and she can be rewarded
Wow, that
with more than just an estate sale worth of prices.
well, that's important. Just one more thing for me on my to-do list, but there you go, John, you're prepared. Just to wrap up, trip to Scotland sounds like,
Yeah.
you said you're not a hoarding collector type, and that's demonstrated by the fact you brought cards to give to your friends. You want to share it with the community. I totally respect that. Sounds like you didn't give them the book though, if you're going to be bringing it back next year. Now you're really privy when it comes to UK auctions and buying these tobacco cards from overseas where they were manufactured, where they could be in circulation, and where people might not appreciate the value of them as much as collectors in the United States or parts of
Mhm.
North America. Uh, so I guess, did you buy card from the UK, own it in America, and then bring it back to Scotland to give to your Scottish friend?
Yes, actually, in the case of one of them, that was exactly it. It was something that I acquired from the UK. It came over here to my collection for a period of time, and then was gifted back to them as somebody who lives in St. Andrews.
It's funny how a little piece of cardboard could travel a lot more than somebody that lives in your town in Alabama.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's traveled a lot in its life, but a lot specifically in the last 5 years, call it.
Amazing. Well, hey, let's wrap up that trip. Although if you're passionate about trip planning, I've got a family vacation coming up next week, and I'll tell you, I've been stressed out trying to get all the details organized. So I need a little John Morton travel advisor in my life. Living vicariously is something I am enjoying these days, especially with these latest interviews with gentlemen who are pursuing dreams that, I've shared, but are not really in the cards for me right now. And that's okay. I love my life. I love my family. My sons are incredible. And all I want right now is to spend time with them. And I can turn on the mic late at night once everybody's gone to bed, make this content I enjoy podcasting for you guys and for myself. But I can't wait to find out how John's trip next year goes and how he manages to incorporate golf cards into his travels. Good luck golfing, John. Everybody out there, enjoy your golf cards, enjoy your golf, your travels. If you want to follow John Morton, it is at John Morton 215. That's JOHNMORTON 215. That's on X, Twitter, and Instagram. Of course, I am at The Golf Card Collector on Instagram, and on Facebook, our group is Golf Cards and Memorabilia. I'll see you there, and I'll see you next week.
Ridiculous golf card collector.